Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Temelkov.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of the Leaders Who Care. It's been a great to have a wonderful guest starting today with the season, and I would like to welcome Ellie Norman, who actually is a former CMO of Formula One. I love racing, I love cars, and she's made a time to join us today. But she's also an exceptional leader who cares about others. As you know, we're on a mission to bring some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world. And it's been a pleasure and honor for really supporting us and listening to the insights of some of the greatest, but also leaders who lead by example and take care of others. Ellie, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome on the Leaders Who Care.
Marian, good morning to you, and thank you so much for taking the time and inviting me to join you. Looking forward to it.
Ellie, there's so many questions, of course, but first of all, what inspires you and what kind of really led you to becoming a CMO of Formula One? How did that all happen? You know, for the ones who love the sport, for the one who really love the really and how it's transformed. Tell us your journey of how did you get there?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and I've been so sort of fortunate in life, and I've had a great journey at Formula One, but I've also had some kind of time out of the sport now, and that sort of time to reflect about what makes me tick, where I've come from, and in truth, in my wildest dreams, I never thought that I would be working in Formula One, have the opportunities that I've had sort of through life. And the one thing that I kind of keep coming back to that really makes me tick is the desire to make a difference. And as I've looked back on the sort of chapters in my career to date, they've been in different industries, and they've been kind of client side, and I had some time sort of agency side. But I think the common element in each of those is being able to make a difference, and that inevitably comes from when something isn't quite perfect or a little bit broken, or there's a problem and there's something that you have to kind of correct, or there might be an incumbent in the market. And that's what really sort of excites me. And inevitably, it always comes down, for me, it always comes down to people, human beings, behavior, and sort of what really drives people's behavior and sort of, I suppose, desires. And that's what I really sort of love doing. And I've been sort of fortunate enough to be able to have a career to date with that as my kind of common thread.
You know, we live in a privileged time, and in many ways we have so much opportunity, so much information in front of us, but sometimes we get lost. Often, in fact, people are not so sure. And since when we talk about care, what is very important for us, from my own personal background and having helped so many leaders around the world with their own career, what is important is what makes you thrive in your workplace rather than survive. And for you personally, what is that secret sauce? What is that ingredient that, because we spend most of our lives at work, it's we don't even spend more time with our families. We spend a lot of 8 hours or more at work, and the other 8 we sleep, or 7, 8, whatever, and then the other 8 not even between family. So what is your secret?
It may sound really sort of cheesy, Marian, but for me, working with great people And I'm very visually driven, and I love to be able to kind of connect dots and really to kind of look at a broad landscape. And for me to always have my sort of eye on this kind of future landscape, this kind of vision, and having a big, powerful story, working with great people, and in that knowledge that you have each other's back, but together we can actually drive change. We can create sort of impact. Those are the things that kind of really keep me energized, actually, and wanting to kind of move forwards on that sort of path of just kind of driving change, and challenging the status quo. And that comes from a great group of people with a shared vision, really wanting to achieve the same things.
Thank you for sharing that. It is actually not trivial at all. When you talk about a group of people, and so many, I see this trait from so many leaders, including Elon Musk, a group of people, Steve Jobs, they're all saying that one of the key elements is a group of people. It doesn't have to be large, it could be small, that united by passion, by common vision, making a difference. It's challenging status quo, getting together. But when you look at leaders around the world, I was doing some research recently, and I wanted to find out how many managers are there in Europe. Just as doesn't mean they're all leaders, but just as in leadership positions. And it's about 15 million according to Google. So I'm not so sure whether that's correct. But if we talk about this, there's quite a lot of people leading others.
Yeah.
So what is important here is, if you look at your experience, and you've been blessed and able to achieve that because you thrive, you say gather a team, but how do you, in other words, it's not just how do you attract the team, but who do you need to become to attract that group of people is the question.
You got to know yourself, and I'm still learning about myself. But it's being really clear on what are you great at? What are you really good at? What's your superhuman strength, your power? But equally know where your shadows are. And I've got some big shadows, but I've also got some things that I'm great at. And inevitably for me, it's being very honest, very open at talking about your shared vision, your big kind of scary sort of hairy idea, and knowing that you can't do that by yourself. It requires a group of people, and inevitably the brilliant thing about humans is we're all different. And so actually, if you can bring those differences together and be complementary to each other, we can actually go further. And I think for me, it's recognizing what I'm great at, knowing where I need support, and also sort of having a great relationship with your boss. And, for me, at a CMO sort of level, that boss is often sort of the CEO of a company, and kind of being able to kind of navigate and have those honest conversations, be able to sort of share your vulnerabilities equally with recognizing and owning your strengths. I never get it right all the time, but I think it's something that you're constantly working on, so that actually with every day you become sort of better. And personally for me, creating this sort of time to reset and to recharge is again really sort of important to keep you at your sort of best, or at least kind of becoming your best.
That is interesting, because thank you, a lot of valuable points. But you said taking the time to reset and recharge. How do you do that? How do you take care of yourself in order to be operating at the optimum? Sometimes I had comments from team members say, hey, you operate at such kind of intense and high level, and you do it consistently. How do you do that?
So The last 2 years, as I think it's been for everyone, massively challenging. And Marian, I definitely did not take care of myself in the way that I should have. And I think it's only having sort of left F1 in kind of Q1 of this year that I've taken that time and I've realized I wasn't my true self. But having had this time out, I'm now back to kind of feeling like Ellie. So one of the things that sort of I always keep in my head, and I love to keep things simple, but I often talk about my shed. And for me, that's sleep, hydration, exercise, and diet. And that very much comes from, for me, my sort of energy levels, and recognizing that I've got to have all of those sort of elements pretty kind of in balance. And it's never perfect, because there'll be some days where, you know, the nature of sport is you're on this kind of treadmill, and the rhythm of sport is so sort of different that inevitably there'll be nights where perhaps you're flying, or you've got a little bit of jet lag, and you're not going to get more than 3 or 4 hours sleep. But I know that I need to kind of do a top up. And that, again, having those bits as my foundation is so important for my physical energy. And then there are other sort of aspects which is also sort of important around emotional energy, or kind of spiritual energy, or kind of intellectual energy. And those are sort of, again, things where it's about, I think, having discipline and a consistency to making sure that you're placing as much importance on some of those elements as you are on kind of doing your job. And sometimes you hear about it, or you read about it, don't you, of like sometimes to stop and to take time out rather than keeping going means you'll come back with kind of greater effectiveness. But sometimes I'm my own worst enemy, because I'm really bad at stopping.
I heard that as well, and sometimes you do so much that, and it's like an adrenaline, or until you finish something, until you won't stop, which has other consequences, of course, family and other people around you, friends. But it's important to take care of yourself, and you highlighted it. It's basic, but it's hydration, good sleep, of course, exercise, good food. That observe yourself. They say get to know your body, get to know your mental health, and then you can show up, because as a leader, it's no longer just you lead other people. What makes a good to great leader, and what do you think carries a weakness?
Ooh. You can tell me, Marian, because I'm still on my kind of learning journey. But for me, certainly what I've really appreciated from great leaders myself is, and I'd like to think that, you know, I deliver this as well. But again, a great leader for me is someone who has a clear vision. They're able to set a direction, a real focus on relationships, because without big relationships, we're not going to be able to get done what we need to do to deliver on sort of a vision. And you need those big relationships, because inevitably what you've got to get done isn't easy. Otherwise, it would have already been done. And that can often mean making decisions between what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And so you have to have relationships that are big enough to really sort of withstand that. And then I think it's about empowering with passion, and people wanting to follow and wanting to go on this journey for you. And those are the sort of elements that I tend to think of. And I know that when I've worked for great leaders myself, I've taken so much value from having been led in that way and empowered to then be able to do what I think is best as an expert in that role in order to deliver on the kind of vision. So a very clear strategy, empowered with passion, to then sort of really go ahead and be able to kind of achieve that.
No, thank you for sharing. This is certainly so powerful, and often people may know them, but reminding of them how important is that. And you said, led by those great leaders, led in such a way,
Yeah.
having a great vision, having that really empowerment and passion. But if you look at specific behaviors of that led in such a great way, what are those, let's say, specifics on a day-to-day basis that makes you feel that way, makes you really thrive at
Yeah.
what you do?
Oh, I love these questions, Marian. They're really probing. It's making me work hard. Connectedness. And, I think as human beings, we're a herd, aren't we? We like to feel like we're part of something that's bigger than just ourselves as individuals. And that sort of day-to-day sense of being connected, of being part of something much bigger, has daily been something that's kind of shown up to me. The aside from the sort of connectedness, feeling like you are continuing to craft what you're good at. So that level of expertise and continuing to learn and to make that better has also been something that I certainly have kind of really appreciated. And I think just it's so small, and it links to the connectedness as well, but this element of being seen and of a leader's sort of role. And I think this is true for all of us, but inevitably for where we work, I often think of myself as being a caretaker. Like the brands that I work for, or I've worked at, are going to outlive me, and I'm there for a period of time. And sort of my point to that is very much about knowing it's not just you. It's not all about you. It's the people around you. And by seeing everyone, just actually lifting their confidence, their sort of energy levels, their belief that they can actually go that little bit further. And you might see it in them, but they might not see it in themselves. Those are some of the sort of elements that I've certainly sort of appreciated from great leaders that have placed that trust in me, because there is a belief that I can do it.
Thank you so much. That's really gives us really important of what describes a great leader to you, and how a CEO could really, or leader, lead and work with exceptionally gifted leader like yourself, because that's, I found sometimes is not always easy to achieve that, to create the atmosphere. It takes a lot of development on the leader as well, to be able to understand and be connected to their people, to understand them, to know what sets their heart on fire. It's not sometimes that straightforward, but for some comes naturally as well. It's and
it's tough, isn't it? Because there are so many variables. It would be easy if the variables didn't change, okay? But if I think back to what we've sort of lived through with the pandemic, there are times then where sometimes a leader has to be much more instructional. And actually, at a time of great uncertainty, the instruction, the clarity of we're going to do steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually, that might be just what your people need. And, those things kind of change, don't they? Depending on the individual and the situation, it's all about that kind of context.
It's a great moment you're raising this, because we got a question here from Stoyan, who we met, and he's actually asking a very interesting question here, talking about challenges. Can you share a major challenge you were faced with professionally, and how did you resolve it, and what do you think when things get heated and urgent, so that we remain calm and solve the situation?
That's a fantastic question. So I've definitely had a few major challenges. There was one situation, actually more than one situation, but one kind of specific sort of situation where, if we go back to what we all have kind of lived through, being in a sport, being in Formula One, when the pandemic hit, like for all businesses and people, it really did turn everything upside down. And we went from being in Melbourne in March 2020, expecting to have a race, into that Friday morning having a engineer in the McLaren race team test positive, which quite quickly was a domino effect into the Grand Prix being cancelled. And if we cast our minds back, that weekend was a weekend that the NFL cancelled their season, the NBA cancelled their season. So, for anyone in kind of marketing and comms, you're always used to working with a plan A, a plan B, sometimes a kind of plan C, but this really was like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? And I think in those situations, the first thing for me sort of always is the impact on others. So it's absolutely a headache when you're in a sport or a league and you have to cancel something. And there are the sort of conversations that you can imagine needing to take place. But you know what? There are 100,000 people who have been looking forward to perhaps this one event in their home country. And they're there for a shared experience or to kind of make memories with friends and families. And that's the sort of place that I think about immediately is, well, how are fans going to feel? Because I'm fortunate in that I get to experience this phenomenal sport every time we race. But for these people, this isn't a normal kind of everyday thing. And so it's often thinking about who are your audiences and being able to understand or try to empathize what they will be feeling. And therefore, what is the best way for us to communicate with them? And I think fundamentally with all communication, just go with the truth. Be prepared for what you might get back, because people respond in different ways. Anger, fear, scared. There's a whole sort of multitude of things. And then there are all the internal kind of things that you have to sort of deal with. But I think being quite clear about the order and the steps that you're going to move in is really important. And again, before you go out and communicate externally, is make sure that everyone internally is aligned so that you have a consistency of sort of message. And with that consistency to ensure it's truthful, but also you are consistent with whoever is sharing that message. Consistency, truthfulness, and kind of clarity as well. So that would definitely be sort of one challenge. That isn't a unique challenge because we all face those challenges during that time. And I think another example would be when something bad happens. And, Formula One is a dangerous sport. It's never been safer or more safe than it is today, but accidents can and still happen. And there was a fatal accident in Spa in Belgium in August 2019. And coming to the second part of the question about how do I sort of respond or keep calm is, I think actually in a crisis, I do tend to just slow everything down, and I become quite sort of methodical and quite logical. And I think, I have a responsibility to remain calm, because I have a responsibility to try to keep everyone calm around. And when there is something like that, again, it's thinking about all of your different audiences, your kind of people, what you have to communicate, what it means to them, the importance of relationships and, family first, then kind of fans, and going through the correct kind of sequence. But it's so important for me as that sort of comms person to remain calm myself, because if I'm in a flap, I think that's only going to kind of create more uncertainty and more sort of chaos for everyone else. And so for me, it's about slowing everything down and almost like removing bits so that everything just becomes quite kind of focused and centered. And I'm not really articulating that in a particularly clear way, but when you're in that situation, just something kind of clicks inside of me.
Thank you. No, that's really, and here coming back to one of the other questions is care a weakness, as some people may see it that way, or is it a strength?
Great question. For me personally, caring is a strength. And I think what's quite sort of fascinating is ultimately people want to be successful, but people will measure success in many different ways. And how you measure success could be different to how I measure success, or actually how we think about it could be very different to someone else or another CEO or another type of business. But I tend to think in the long term. And yes, there are always kind of gates that you have to pass through, or kind of hurdles. And I think for us in business, that can often be your quarterly sort of results. But it's always thinking about what is the real time horizon and what is the outcome or the change that we want to affect. And without care, everything becomes very transactional. But if you genuinely care for someone, they will go above and beyond for you, for a cause, for the business. And so for me, it's one of the kind of core characteristics that I would genuinely describe myself as being a kind and caring person, because it really matters to me how other people are thinking and feeling. And it doesn't mean that we always agree, because we don't always agree. But coming from a basis of being kind and caring, when there is a disagreement or you're not going to align on something, it's knowing that you've done it in the right way.
Oh, I like what you just said about care, and give us an example where, especially in Formula One, where care made a difference for you.
For my team, my people, I care sort of deeply about how sort of people are. And so there is an understanding that everyone's got their own little battles going on in life. And so therefore the way you show up at work inevitably will be impacted by stuff that I might not be aware of. And so there's a really small things, and it comes back to making sure everyone feels seen, is how you greet people and how you greet everyone. And that for me is just wishing everyone good morning, stopping by, talking to people. So yeah, I may have a request of like, oh, can you remind me, what was that stat, or do we have any data on that? But first of all, it's like make time for other people, be able to see them, how life is, how their weekend is, whatever it might be, okay? What are they excited about, or kind of what are you worried about? and put the time in to kind of like walk the halls. And that's a very small, but I think quite a powerful way of showing care to your sort of people. And that goes a long way.
And we see that you also put a lot of effort into diversity and inclusion, and really that's part of you when you launch a campaign. We Race as One.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of caring, obviously on a far more public scale. But I think there is, sport is so powerful at bringing people together. And you can be from different backgrounds, different nationalities. You might not even speak the same language. There are so many nuances, but the one thing that you may have an absolute shared love and passion for is a particular sport or particular team. And that should be used in the right way. And Formula One as a sport is so incredibly powerful because of how global it is in its nature. And it also attracts criticism for some of the countries that are all racing. And it can be very easy to not go somewhere because of the criticism. But if you are going to go somewhere, it's going there knowing that clearly it's going to be commercially beneficial for everyone. But if that's one reason, what's the bigger reason? And if that bigger reason is about how do you shine a spotlight into a culture or into a country that is wanting to change, and use your sport because of the kind of the light that is shone on it to maybe help to accelerate some of those changes or to ensure that there is a positive legacy, then that's a reason to do that, and you keep going back. And that's a brilliant thing about sort of Formula One is it will race in countries not just for kind of 2 or 3 years, but it's been racing in countries since 1950. And actually to have that relationship, and the most obvious example is Saudi Arabia. Now, I'd never been to Saudi Arabia prior to going with Formula One, and I had a perspective, and going to Saudi and working with the team of people, I was very surprised as to how many talented women I was working with in the different ministries. It was fantastic through the kind of work and all the planning to see mixed grandstands and concerts happening and seeing the impact, particularly on younger women who are there watching something that they are learning about, or they're kind of saying this is a great sport, seeing them enjoy themselves with kind of friends at a concert in a mixed environment, giving them the opportunity to perhaps take part in some karting or to kind of do some engineering. That's like really, really cool stuff. And that's kind of one example of We Race as One. But the We Race as One, again, was very much driven from having that time at home when the pandemic hit. And we obviously cancelled the Melbourne race in March 2020. And then we were working at home. So we didn't start racing as a sport until July 2020. So it's a good sort of 3 months there of like, oh, what are we going to do? So Chase, the CEO at the time, incredible sort of team. Obviously, he's a brilliant leader, but incredible team working super hard to get the sport back up and running and how we would do that safely. And the other side of that was, well, how do we use this as an opportunity to come back in a slightly different way? And the We Racers one coincided and obviously was inspired not only by seeing how people were responding to the pandemic, and actually for me the community spirit that we saw happen across the world, but also with the murder of George Floyd, and actually sort of speaking to kind of Lewis and seeing the impact that had, it really felt that, again, the We Racers one was an opportunity to really come together and to use the Formula One platform to care and to drive good.
We have a very interesting question here when you talk about care and competitiveness, in sport, and he's another great question was, can you be highly competitive and caring at the same time? It is their sweet spot.
I love that question. And actually, to your earlier question as well about challenges, when you work in sport, I think, as you've highlighted, you have phenomenal athletes. And typically in sort of Formula One and a league team, perhaps it is slightly different in the sense of you have teams going against each other. So it's slightly different to, say, football, or it's slightly different to rugby or cricket, okay? But fundamentally, they are there to win. And so actually, when you then look at something like We Racers One, and we're wanting all of these athletes that typically, when the lights go out, they are there to win. When you want them to do something together, that's a very different mind that is required, and a real kind of shift. And we actually did spend quite a bit of time talking about that. And I think one of the frustrations is when we were doing We Racers One, and particularly at the very beginning with end racism, we saw many other sports taking a knee, and there was consistency. Now in Formula One, perhaps by its kind of global nature, you have drivers from many different nationalities, and for some of those drivers, there was a nationality thing of like, in my culture, I just would never take a knee. I would take a knee when I'm proposing, but I just wouldn't do that. And yet, for other people, it's very hard to understand. Well, everyone else is doing this. Why won't you do this?
Mm.
And that's where you can either continue to have that competitive nature, or you can start to think much more collectively to say, what is the outcome that we want to achieve here? And you can go around and you can say, what is the right thing to do? Do we care about ending racism? Do we care about driving and striving for equality and equity? And do we think that everyone should have a right to education? And invariably you can ask those 20 drivers and they'll say yes, 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 yes.
I like what you said, because it can be expressed in different ways. So the end outcome, not the fact that you don't agree to
Correct.
just do the nailing on the thing, but it's more
Correct.
of how you express care.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do it in the same way. And people should be okay with that. And they shouldn't be like imposing on people, because that's then no longer, it should be voluntary, care.
100%. And in Formula One, the solution was, we will create 20 seconds within the schedule. Everyone feels comfortable wearing a t-shirt, but you will choose your own gesture. Everyone is aligned on the outcome, but you choose your own gesture. And that was different to other sports. But for me, it was a way where we were able to go from an individual competitive mindset into a collective caring, outcome-focused mindset.
I love that. Care, it not only works, guys. It's, as Ellie said, care is cool. So it makes a difference. Try it. You might actually enjoy it so much. That really makes a difference. One important question, because I talk to a lot of leaders, and after all, when we look back, when we're at the end of our lives, we all hope at the end that we probably have had a great life and we don't regret many things in life. And that comes down to, of course, how you do things every day and how fulfilled you are.
Mm.
Give me your definition of fulfillment.
Mm.
What is fulfillment in life for you?
Ultimately, it comes down to, for me, health, happiness, and great relationships. And I'm very driven and disciplined. I want to be successful. I want to be the best that I do and go home knowing that I've made a difference. But what makes me feel fulfilled is having health,
Freedom, so you can go anywhere. Being healthy, you can go on a mountain bike, you can climb a mountain, you can go and see your friends, and people take that for granted. So please
time with my husband. Sometimes the simplest of sharing a meal with friends and family, like my perfect evening, cooking, people around a table, great conversation.
Thank you for sharing that. For you personally, what's next, and what sets your heart on fire, in other words, and what's coming next for you, Ellie?
So what's coming next is chapter 4 of my journey.
Chapter 4, interesting.
Chapter 4. I'm really excited to embrace a new challenge. And for me, the ingredients of being able to make an impact, to really kind of drive relationships is important. And if I'm more specific, the brilliant thing about sports is when you think about fans. And so actually fan engagement, what matters to fans, and showing up in the right way. If I can do that, then I'll be challenged, excited, and happy. It's far easier said than done, because there are so many kind of things that impact that. But that's really sort of important to me. And again, coming back to, I think something I said earlier, is also kind of recognizing that when I go into my sort of chapter 4, I will be a caretaker for a period of time. And for me, it's important that I leave something in a better position than when I found it. And that's what I would like to kind of go into and do next.
Excellent. Final question. What can we do to spread care in a sustainable way, in a loving way, in a way that is inspiring rather than, because you can't impose care on anyone. You can only choose to care.
Yeah. So there's something that's always stuck with me, and a friend of mine, a lady called Jazz, who she's incredible. She always talks about thinking about leaving people feeling joy and feeling kind of valued. And for me, it's the smallest thing about thinking about every single interaction you have with someone and thinking about it from their perspective. How am I going to leave this person feeling? And if I can leave them feeling valued and with joy and hope, then hopefully I've made a difference to their day.
I love that. This is so, and this is what a great way to finish the day. Basically, you just said two things that are fundamental. Every time you meet a person, ask those two questions. How did I make them feel? And what value did I add?
Yeah.
So if we continuously do that, we'll have a fantastic and more caring world. Thank you so much for sharing this, Ellie. It's been really wonderful to have you today and share your wisdom, your journey from your perspective. And I'm very excited to start a new season. And next episode, we're having one of the most caring CEOs that is joining us next week, and looking forward, obviously, to following you. And if anyone has any questions for you, what is the best way to reach you?
So, first of all, Marian, thank you. I've really, really valued and enjoyed our chat this morning. I'll definitely be tuning in to listen to the next episode and continue to learn. And you'll find me where you would expect to find me. LinkedIn is a great channel.
Excellent. We wish you fantastic chapter 4. God bless you and keep spreading care. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you very much.